And hello and welcome to all of our listeners here on GIC Radio. My name is Bernard Alvarez, and I will be hosting a very, very interesting show today. We have a very special guest joining us in just a few minutes. Chris Everard of Enigma TV will be here to speak to us on his new book, Stone Age Psychedelia, among other things. Those of you that know who Chris Everard is, he has been a guest on the show before, and he has a wonderful collection of documentaries that he's put out over the years, and we look forward to speaking to him in just a moment. Before we do that, let me welcome my beautiful co-host from across the pond, the lovely Yvonne White, a.k.a. Anela Nusta Shanti. Hello, Yvonne. How are you?
I think she's gone off to get a break.
Oh, we lost Yvonne. Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know what happened there. But in the meantime, let me welcome our tech person, our assistant coordinator here at the GIC, Reverend Trevor Knott. Hello, Trevor. How are you today? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. That's a good thing. I walk away from the switchboard for 2 minutes and look what happens. How are you doing today, Trev?
Doing good. Just recovering from a stressful weekend, and I'm very interested in the. There's a huge scandal up here. Stefan Harper and his conservatives are in a lot of hot water. They have committed electoral fraud by using what the media has deemed them as robocalls.
Well, another national election into a scandal. What else is new?
Did anyone else get cut off then?
Nope, just you. Hello, Yvonne. We're on the air, and we're very happy we've got you back. How are you today?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello. I'm doing really well. Computers.
I'm telling you. It was funny because right before the show, I was like, let me just warn them that the electric here is still being worked on. So if we have a brownout, just please be aware. I will call each and every one of you back just in case that happens. We had about 2 surges yesterday, which knocked the computer off and shut it down. It was very strange. Oh. But ever since that snowstorm 2 weeks ago, they've just been working really hard on the lines here. But I'm grateful you have computer access where you are.
Me too.
Anyway, so you're back to work at the Healing Center. How's that going?
Oh, yeah, much better. The weather helps, but it's bringing people out to their houses more. Business is starting to pick up a bit more, which is nice.
That's great.
It's nice to be well enough to actually do treatments again.
Yes. I know that you were suffering from some kind of well, I know you had a little chest bug or something?
Well, apparently it was a viral infection on my chest, and everybody I know has either had it or poorly. I put it down to just like massive clearing.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. But it just wiped me out completely. It's taken weeks. I've still got the annoying cough.
Wow. That's
I'm feeling much better, thank you.
Good. I'm very glad to hear that. Anyway, I just wanted to let everybody know at the beginning of the hour, before I forget, and just in case I do forget, that the Great Gathering, which is Miriam Delicato's project, global project actually, it's a great project. And we've been collaborating with her a little bit, as you all know. We had the leaders of the Dogon tribe come and speak with us a couple of weeks ago, and now they've asked me to come on their radio show this Thursday. So if those of you are in the United States, it's going to be at 10 o'clock Eastern time. It's a little late for me, actually, but they're out in the Pacific, so we have to go by their time zone. But it should be very interesting. I think this is only the 4th or 5th radio show that they've done. This is a new project that's just been launched, and we're doing everything we can to support them. And I'm very, very grateful and honored that they've asked me to come on as one of their first guests. And speaking of great guests, for those of you that don't know Chris Everard, he is the producer of many, many award-winning documentaries. Some of my favorites is Spirit World, the Illuminati, and among others. He also just recently published a book called Stone Age Psychedelia, which touches on the subject of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt using psychedelics to commune with their gods. So without further ado, let me welcome to the show Chris Everard. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
Hello, Bernard. It's good to be with you again. Hello, Yvonne. And what's the tech chap's name again?
Trevor.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hello. Nice to be with all of you again.
We're really happy to have you back on the show. Last time you joined us was back on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
We covered the idea that America really is not free, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today with the power families and who really runs the world and is controlling things behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you want to write a book on the subject, and what drew you to the information that you released?
The research that went into Stone Age psychedelia goes back 19 years, and I started researching it that long ago.
Oh.
And I traveled to a lot of countries, and you know, when I do my documentary films, I don't like actually just taking people's word for it. I usually go to the actual countries and I go directly to the source. And when you do a book like this, you have to go you have to do a lot of traveling. Went to a lot of museums around the world, and the book has been a lot more successful than I thought it would be, because it's really just dealing psychedelics in the ancient world, and how those ancient plants are being used in high ceremonial magic to really change the brain chemistry so that you can have direct communion with God. And I thought, well, it's a bit of a a niche book, but in actual fact, it went into the top 10 history books on Amazon.com, and I was very surprised by that. So that was good news, and it's generated something like 50 or 60,000 emails.
Wow.
Which I cannot actually, obviously, I'm going through just a few at a time. They clog up my servers, and it's just me, and I don't have a huge staff of people to actually read those emails, but. It's. I think the thing that really sparked people is that the sort of message that was coming through on all of these emails is, I suppose, really a lot of Christian people, surprisingly, had actually come across my book, and my book actually explains that when you see these or you read about these visions in the Bible, these mind-blowing kind of descriptions of wheels within wheels, with beasts and lions and dragons and everything else. These are psychedelically induced visions that have been induced using things like mandrake and mushrooms, which were very, very popular amongst the early Christian cults in the Adriatic area, in the Mediterranean as well. And this has really sparked something with a lot of Christian people. They send me messages saying, "Wow, I really get it now. These guys like Moses were high."
Yeah.
Obviously that's a shorthand way of saying it, but that is the truth of it. So, so it's been a very, very long project, and I've got 2 other books which are coming out later this year that I've been working on for about 5 years. So there you go.
Wow! And it sounds like biblical shamanism, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Well, the actual the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I go right into the Dead Sea Scrolls in the book, and I explain who wrote them, where they wrote them. This was really basically a mushroom cult. They were really frowned upon by the Orthodox rabbis. They really didn't like them. So they set up shop in a very, very hot place called Qumran on the edge of the Dead Sea. And there what they did is they excavated kind of baths, filled them with water, and they used to take a wide range of hallucinogenic herbs, mostly acacia frankincense, which when you mix that with the seeds of the Syrian rue plant, which contains dimethyltryptamine, you actually create the world's most powerful hallucinogen. And they were taking these very, very powerful Syrian rue and frankincense kind of vapors, and then what they would do is they would tread water, laying on their backs, looking at the stars, and each person had their own individual bath outside that had been hacked into the rock, and they called themselves the Sons of Dawn, and they wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, what you really see is true kind of mystical, far out, completely tripped out psychedelic Christianity.
Wow.
And that's how it really started.
Very, very interesting about that. I find the text of the Dead Sea Scrolls, what I have read of them, to be they're probably the ones I like the most of all the biblical writings, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. In the research that you've done, because we know that there are dark magicians and there are light magicians and everything in between. Did you discover in any of your research did they have a specific ritual or the specific way in which the psychedelics were used to contact a particular entity or a particular god, whether it be a dark god or a good god or a bad god or,
Absolutely. That is really, Bernard, the main thrust of my book. I actually go through every single one of the major psychedelic plant families, including all of the different species of mushrooms, and I explain to the reader as you go through the book, for example, the psilocybin, the small Phrygian cat mushrooms in Europe, these were used by the Druids, and the Druids were the cults that occupied the megalithic stone sites like Stonehenge and Avebury. And I go through the book and I match up which of these hallucinogenic psychedelic plants were used by different factions. And the book builds up to the point where we come into the present day, and I interviewed many black magicians. I'm talking about high-level black magicians. They were willing to speak to me on the subject of psychedelics. And in the last 2 chapters, I explain that they are actually now using a human brain hormone as a psychedelic, because dimethyltryptamine has actually been researched by several doctors over the years. It naturally occurs in grass, it naturally occurs in plants, but it also, there's a human grade of dimethyltryptamine that is naturally created in the human body. And these black magicians that I interviewed, what they're doing is they are actually getting frozen DMT hormone extract, and they're using that in their ceremonies to it's actually a very, very powerful but very short experience, and they're intravenously injecting it standing in the middle of magic circles.
Oh my God.
And they are invoking King Baal, who is one of the 4 I suppose you could say it's a kind of king of hell, if you like.
Right.
There's 72 sort of major demons, which are mentioned in the European books of black magic. And there's 4 of them, which are like the kind of bosses, if you like, of all the others. And, so I bring, at the end of the book, my book starts off actually in Iraq, in the Neolithic era, and it goes through the chapters, and you end up with these very high-tech black magicians using extracted human hormone in their rituals. And also, I expose in my book that the Scottish Rite Council, now their headquarters, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think their headquarters are in Texas. The Scottish Rite in America have actually funded DMT psychedelic research with members of the public and volunteer students. And there is, in the last part of my book, I explain that there is a war taking place in the spirit world. And this is a psychic war where people's etheric bodies are being attacked by these flying kind of black darts, which fly at the speed of thought and are created by, if you like, the etheric bodies of these black magician warriors. And they've learned this technique from shamans in the Amazon. And, that was really, it's been a very complicated book to research. And, it took a long time to even get the confidence of some of these people, to get them to open up and start speaking to me about, the different books that they use, because a lot of the books which I mention in my book, books which I had to travel around the world to see in major national libraries, some of them had been written in blood in the medieval era, and they contain the recipes for actually making these psychedelic potions. So all in all, it's been a big task to actually pull it all together.
Oh yeah.
It took a very long time, and some books write themselves, and you kind of get a book in your head and you write it. Other books like this one, it was just very slow. It was a very slow process actually getting the confidence of some of these people.
I bet.
But worth it.
Absolutely, especially with the information that's being brought out. I guess it's a question that our listeners might be interested in, because I know some of our audience are involved in shamanism and whatnot. When I was studying shamanism and was dabbling in the shamanic world and whatnot, there was a term called sensak, which the Havaro talked about creating etheric darts. Yes. And basically, I was wondering if that's what you mean by the black balls that they stole from the Amazon.
That's it. You've got it right there. The Amazonian Indians that I feature in my book, they have a word for it. It's exactly like you say, Bernard. It's a form of shamanism. It's categorized as dark shamanism.
Yeah.
Rather like we make distinctions between white and black magic in European ceremonial magic. And that's exactly what it is. And they call it Kainama in the Amazon. And Kainama is the dark black shamanism. And yes, these etheric darts are now, unfortunately, being used, get this, by the American military. And in my book, I explain that in Haiti, I should say to the listeners, first of all, because a lot of people don't realize this, that Haiti is one half of an island.
Yeah.
The other half of the island is the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic was formed by a cult, a Catholic cult of monks. The other half of the island, which is Haiti, has a national religion, which is voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, what I did is I actually followed the history of some of these military officers. I'm talking about, some of America's top military brass. And what they did is they formed groups of Marines. They went into Haiti, and they were stationed there for 6, 7, 8 months at a time. And what they were doing is they were actually getting the voodoo practitioners to teach them the deepest secrets of kind of dark or black mind warfare. Now, you've got really basically two areas that the Pentagon were investing in. They were investing in using, say, for example, telepathy to project thoughts into the enemy so that they thought that their heart was stopping or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half of the research that was going on there was really spiritual. And it was about actually attacking spiritually the etheric bodies of your enemy. And this is all part and parcel of shamanism. It's the dark side of shamanism, which unfortunately doesn't really... it's amazing how many people I meet who say, well, I'm a shaman. But they don't realize that voodoo is part of shamanism, and Cain is part of shamanism, and there are also, other branches of shamanism which really are basically involved in child sacrifice, and they use parts of children's bodies in their ceremonies. That is also shamanism. It's been labeled voodoo, vow down. There's other labels for it, but we are basically dealing with a huge area of, if you like, earth magic, spiritual magic. Some of it is good, and some of it is very, very bad. And the bad side is what the Pentagon have actually been investing in. And these etheric black darts are, if you like, they're formed in the minds of the person who wants to actually fire that dart. And like I said earlier, they fire them using thought. And so therefore they imagine the dart actually flying through and penetrating the etheric body of their target victim. And this is very, very serious, because what's happened is that the Amazonian shamans that I was speaking to told me that through this training process that the Pentagon have been investing in, and they've been, obviously there's an element of trial and error, they have caused havoc in the spirit world, and there is a spiritual war going on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which is something which is an unspoken kind of subject, if you like. It's a very taboo subject to even discuss the spirit world in general on the mainstream media. And then when you start talking about the Pentagon investing in this type of research and using the taxpayers' money to actually stick these guys out there for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, that's something which, nobody touches in the mainstream media at all.
Yeah.
And how long did you say they've been doing this, the military?
It goes back to the late 1950s and the early 1960s. Right. And there's a really dark and sinister kind of conclusion that I come to in my book, and that is that a lot of the highest, most advanced kind of dark shamanistic kind of witch doctors, I know that's a derogatory term, but I mean, just so the listeners know what we're talking about, what happened is that after the Pentagon had absorbed all of the information from these people and had interviewed them, they took teams of linguists there, and they had them training their teams of people. They then killed those people.
Oh, my goodness.
And they killed them for the specific reason that they did not want any other military faction from any other country having this information. And
that makes sense for them. Is this similar to recently? Well, maybe a couple of years ago, it was put out as a comedy, but it was a movie about the military doing the whole remote viewing program called The Men That Stare at Goats, and they would stop the heart of an animal right in front of them.
Yeah.
And I love the way they put it out as a comedy, and I really enjoyed the movie, but I didn't see it as a comedy. However, I have had remote viewers on the show before discussing former military remote viewers on the show and whistleblowers to that effect. I don't know if they call it remote viewing anymore. From what I understand, they officially stopped the program, but that's officially. But it's similar to that kind, or have they elevated that program? What do you see the connection there with that program?
Right. Well, The Men Who Stare at Goats, that film starring George Clooney, is based on a book of the same name that was written by John Ronson, who's a British journalist. And John Ronson has actually produced a TV series for his company, World of Wonder. And his TV series is called The Secret Rulers of the World. And John is, a pretty thorough researcher, and he goes out and he meets these people the same as I do. But he has a very, very clever comic kind of gift to the way that he presents things as well. Mm-hmm. And it was actually John Ronson's company that actually arranged the infiltration of Bohemian Grove.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was just one episode of that World of Wonder series that was focusing on Bohemian Grove. And then part of that program was interviewing Alex Jones, and it was really John's kind of initiative to actually get in there. And in the program, you see that they interview other people who'd also infiltrated Bohemian Grove just by dressing it like kind of preppy, well-to-do Phi Beta Kappa, typical kind of frat kind of people, and just walking straight the way through past the security guards. And this had been done several times before. And John tracked these people down, and then Alex Jones was invited to go up there. And that's how the Alex Jones video of Bohemian Grove came about. John actually went into Bohemian Grove as well. And I believe the guy's name was Roger. He was the original guy that actually showed people how to do it. And, you know, you don't skulk in. You just walk straight through the actual main gates. So John then wrote The Men Who Stare at Goats. And you're absolutely right, Bernard. You know, the actual film has got this kind of comic twist to it. Now, remote viewing, as far as my research shows, it's just a kind of passive observation. You know, it's a passive observation of a target person or a target area or a building. My book goes into how you're really basically training teams of psychic soldiers, psychic mercenaries and psychic assassins who don't passively observe. What they are actually doing is that they are planting thoughts that lead to panic attacks in the person and other nasty thoughts that lead to broken sleep patterns, and they are wearing the enemy down psychologically using projected thought. So, you know, and like I said earlier in the broadcast, there's two sides to it. There's the telepathic side to it, and then there's the spiritual side to it. So it's very, very serious what's been going on. And I've been making a new film as well, Spirit World 3. And you know, what happened is that I already started making Spirit World 3 before I started writing the book. And Spirit World 3 actually exposes the fact that there are these psychic teams at Area 51, and they're also working at Edwards Air Force Base. They work for the Air Force, actually. And they are developing psychic and quantum physics technology side by side in order to kind of puncture wormholes between our universe and the parallel universes which surround us. And this research is being guided by the publications of two British professors, Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking. And they are actually now manipulating the atmosphere, and they are actually creating these spiral wormholes. And what it is that they are actually now able to actually take small molecules and small particles, and they are beginning to manipulate space-time via these wormholes. And in my new film, you see home camcorder footage from all over the world: Scandinavia, California, Australia, China, Russia, Norway, and you can see that these spiral phenomena are becoming, more common. And once they've opened up these spiral wormholes, then what happens is that a team of these specially psychically trained teams then make telepathic kind of communion through that wormhole. And in some of the camcorder footage, from California, you can see these lights flying out of these wormholes in the sky.
Oh.
So the last 2 years has been, it's been a really full-on kind of time for me, pulling all these things together. And lucky, I've had a lot of assistance from former military people, and they've even given me camcorder footage of strange lights in the sky that they filmed while they were on active duty, because they have night vision equipment and this kind of thing. And it's been a really full-on 2 years for me, pulling all of this stuff together, because quite frankly, there's not really anything being spoken about, not very commonly anyway, about what's going on at Area 51.
No. Now these wormholes that you're describing, is this anything to do with? Well, a good example is we recently had Laura Eisenhower on, and she's the great granddaughter of Ike Eisenhower, and she was describing to us a project where the military has created, for lack of a better term, a wormhole or a Stargate into other worlds. Is that kind of the similar program?
Yes, that's it. That is it in a nutshell. That's exactly what they're doing. If you look at the research of Professor Roger Penrose, now he works in the same building, actually even on the same floor, in the same building as Stephen Hawking. And these guys are, they're top of the class, and they're way ahead. And they now say, you can, this is all publicly available. They now say that there are 11 universes. It's not quite clear whether they are 11 copies and they are 11 identical universes, or whether they are 11 unique universes. But they are separated by these membranes, which they call just brains for short.
I've read that a little bit.
Yeah. And Roger Penrose is, this guy is, he is the kind of world authority on superstring theory. Stephen Hawking is the world's authority on black holes. And about 18 months ago, there was an experiment at the Hadron Collider, which is this particle accelerator, which is underground. It goes in a huge loop. It crosses the border between Switzerland and France. They began making artificial black holes, according to this latest research from Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking. Now, what happened is that they calculated that the artificial black hole would be, much, much tinier than, the head of a pin. And it would only exist for a microsecond. Or less than a nanosecond. Yeah, a nanosecond, just a few nanoseconds. Well, these things were lasting for entire microseconds. And, what happened is that the supermagnets were bent inside the Hadron Collider, because a black hole sucks everything into it.
Yeah.
And that's why it had to be shut down, because they had to replace the magnets.
Oh, so that was why they had to put everything on hold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a success. It did work. It did confirm that you could actually make these black holes. So all of that side of it was successful. But the problem is that these things were hanging around a lot longer than they had calculated.
Wow.
And you can't really have anything like that hanging around for more than a couple of nanoseconds. Otherwise, you are going to create a massive catastrophe where all matter within the vicinity of that artificial black hole will be attracted into it, because that's what they do. And so there was a big shutdown, and now it's back and running again.
Yeah.
So that's on the border between Switzerland and France. Now, in Scandinavia, they've been doing these space-time teleportation experiments using very tiny particles of matter, and they have gone into the quantum realm, the very, very tiny realm. We're looking at not just atoms, but we're looking at the gaps, the spaces between the protons, the electrons, and the gaps that are between them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really what quantum research is all about. Quantum just means very, very tiny research and tiny phenomena. Now, for the first thing I should say to all the listeners is that as soon as you start going down that small and you start looking at things in that detail, all the normal laws of physics no longer apply.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this huge divide now where the Newtonian physics is now called classical physics, and quantum physics is now a whole new kind of ball game. And those little kind of diagrams that you see at school where an atom looks like a kind of mini solar system, where you've got the nucleus with the electrons all spinning around it.
Yeah.
I mean, the atoms are not like that. They are peaks of kind of self-emanating energy. They do not look like a tiny solar system, but that analogy is just a very useful kind of way of simplifying something which is quite complicated.
Right.
So what we've had is we've got two parallel projects going on at the moment, which could lead to massive spiritual breakthroughs, or they could lead to utter catastrophe.
Yeah.
And that is the hunt for the Higgs boson and the Higgs field.
Yes.
And at the same time, the development of artificial black holes. Now, this Higgs thing is very, very worrying. And do we have breaks, Bernard?
We have a break in about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's great. Well, the Higgs boson is on the BBC. You see it cropping up on CNN, and you see these news reports. We're hunting for this strange particle called the Higgs boson. Well, when you really look into it, it's absolutely terrifying what they're really, really doing. Because in the time of Sir Isaac Newton, defined the law of gravity. And, he lived in the same part of London where I come from, in Greenwich. And he was a very, very clever guy, and he was an alchemist. Now, at the time of Newton, everybody believed in the spirit world, and everybody believed that the spirit world had an effect on the physical world, and the spirit world was believed to exist just on the outer surface of the atmosphere, and that was called the ether.
Yeah.
And that all particles, meteors, asteroids, whatever, that passed through there were somehow affected by this ether. And then Einstein came along and really basically threw that notion away. And people don't realize what a revolution Einstein was, because before Einstein, at the turn of the century, the world's leading scientists, the people that invented the steam train, who invented television, invented vacuum tubes, invented really basically all of the technology which created the modern world which we have today, all those scientists believed in the ether.
Yeah.
And Sir Oliver Lodge was a spiritualist. He was a member, I think he might have been even the president of the Royal Society. He wrote a book which I can highly recommend to the listeners, called The Ether of Space. And, his research was very deep, and also Sir William Crookes, who was also a spiritualist. He was a member of the Psychical Research Society in London. He was an associate of the Golden Dawn. He was a member of the Royal Society, and he was a pioneer of these Crookes tubes, which looked like giant valves. And, these guys had defined the ether, in terms of physics at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Einstein came along and threw it all away. But now, modern quantum physics has, if you like, rediscovered the ether. They've rediscovered the spirit world, and the ether is now labeled the Higgs field. And the Higgs field works like this. If you have a molecule or an atom, it's got no mass or weight to it. So the big question is how come if atoms don't have any weight to them, how comes things made of atoms weigh something?
Mm-hmm.
This was a big fundamental question. And what they found is this thing called the Higgs field. The Higgs field exists in the quantum realm. It'll take the rest of the show to just I'm just trying to simplify things. What happens is that energy emanates from some mysterious source, which has not yet been defined.
Mm-hmm.
It passes through the Higgs field, and the Higgs field is like honey or jam or cold custard. And it kind of slows it down like somebody walking through blancmange. And this slowing and this drag creates the mass. But there are some exotic particles, and this is where the Higgs boson comes in, that seem to have some kind of, if you like, special deal on the side, where they can actually pass through this Higgs field without, going through this process.
Oh.
Yeah. So to find that has become the paramount holy grail within quantum physics, because if they can find it, holy bejesus, they'll be able to, they'll be able to manipulate reality.
Yeah.
Which is very, very serious indeed.
What comes to mind is the old Hindu mythology of I want to say it's Shiva. I might be wrong, but like the Higgs field would be like the dream, the illusion, perhaps, where we have the source, which is I'm probably going to mess up all the names, but the source would be like the Brahma, the Godhead. And then the dream of the God, which would be the illusion that's created here on this planet.
Yeah, well, if you want an analogy, really what we're looking at, and this is really what I've uncovered, and is going to be in my next film, which is Spirit World 3, but it's also going to be covered in Feed Your Brain magazine as well, because I've uncovered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an analogy, this is quantum physicists confirming what we see written in the Kabbalah. And in the Kabbalah, you have the Tree of Life with 10 spheres, and at the top, you have very light, ephemeral, kind of gossamer-like kind of substance.
Right.
And as you descend through these Sephiroth, or these zones, or these fields, you gradually get denser and denser and denser and denser.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly what quantum physics is describing. And the interesting thing is that the world's leading quantum physics since the time of Niels Bohr and Einstein, they have all come from a Hebrew background. And of course we know that the Kabbalah makes up a greater portion of the mystical Hebrew teachings from, not only Palestine, basically Lebanon, Syria, parts of Iran. Those geographical areas are responsible for creating this mystical kind of blueprint or explanation of how the creation process happens. And all of these quantum physicists come from Hebrew family backgrounds. So it's very, very fascinating. And every single one of these characters that's played a major role in the manipulation, the molecular manipulation, including Oppenheimer with the nuclear research that went into the atomic bombs, Niels Bohr, nearly all of them come from a Hebrew, Judaic, Kabbalistic background.
It reminds me very much of I believe it was Aleister Crowley who said that that magic is science not yet found or science not yet proven. That all of these paradigms, all of these magical formulations are really scientific. They just haven't been discovered yet, and it looks like we're beginning to discover them now in the quantum field, just like you've described.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling, and well, my research that I've been doing for Feed Your Brain magazine, where I've been writing about this for the last about 2 years, is that honestly, Bernard, they've known about this for a long time. And, quantum physics is really the central thesis of the Kabbalah, with the spiritual aspect stripped away from it. Quantum physics is the Kabbalah.
Just put into a mainstream, dichotomy, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the danger now, though, is that we are seeing these black projects in these underground bases and these facilities out in the deserts. Huge amounts of taxpayers' money is being taken. This is the first time in human history that this has happened. Mm-hmm. And, billions of people are having money stolen from their wage packets, and this money is being invested in this type of research, which, like I said earlier, could end up being a complete catastrophe. They could literally end up rewiring the process of creation. And we can see already, if you bring it into the field of genetics, ever since the genomes were mapped, we can see, I think it's very obvious to most of the listeners, that we can see now creeping in stem cell cures, if you're rich, blood cleansing kind of genetic treatments, if you're rich, and genetic research for crops, which basically keeps the poor countries poor, and it keeps the rich countries rich through a monopoly of agro-scientific research. And if the same thing happens at the quantum level, and we are now in Scandinavia witnessing, and the scientific books are starting to admit, that they are actually transporting molecules from one place to another in space-time, this technology in the wrong hands is going to lead to potential disaster.
Absolutely. I can't help but, with everything that you've just said, it kind of reminds me on a very grand scale, the disparity, the class disparity that people aren't really aware of. It's almost as if, kind of like the Occupy movement talks about class disparity and whatnot, they're merely scratching the surface. If they actually knew where this money was going, we talk about black ops all the time, and I feel that most of us don't realize how much money is being hidden and taken from the public, the public, like you said.
Yeah, it runs into not billions, but trillions of dollars over the last years. And the aerial photographs that have been published of Area 51 show some very interesting apparatus out in the desert. They have these kind of pylons or pillars in the desert with these diamond-shaped aerodynamic kind of forms on them. And this is to test stealth craft and whether they are radar invisible. And they've got these giant radar dishes next to these pillars. And on top of the pillars, you've got these diamond-shaped, stealth-shaped kind of craft. Well, when you look at the aerial photographs, what you see one of these pillars with a radar dish at McDonnell Douglas's installation at Area 51. And next door, there's another one, but that's not part of the McDonnell Douglas research facility. That's actually run by Lockheed Martin. And then literally just a short drive away from there's Rockwell. And they also have one of these things. Now, my impression was that these companies were meant to be in competition with each other.
Yeah.
But what's actually happening is that trillions of dollars are being stolen from people and are being funneled into if you like, a kind of scientific warfare monopoly. and they are working together, and they are siphoning off vast amounts of money, and over the years, they've gone underground. I don't really think they've gone underground for any other reason other to hide the evidence of what is enormous investment. Because if it was above ground, you'd be flying across the Nevada desert and you'd come across a load of skyscrapers. And you can't have a black ops in a skyscraper.
Yeah. You know, when you're talking about all of these large companies coming together and doing basically what might be a program for one specific outcome or a program for another specific outcome, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, as someone who has had many guests on the show referring to chemtrails, but the chemtrail program is a global program. Absolutely. No one really knows who's behind it. It has to be more than one corporation. It has to be funded more than the profits made by that corporation, and to what ends.
Yeah, it's a huge international global operation. It costs a huge amount of money. And I made a film called Secret Space 3 that came out last year. And the barium crystals, which are used, amongst other ingredients as well, in the chemtrail kind of mixture, in the aerosol spray. It's aluminium hydroxide and barium are the two major kind of ingredients. Yeah. These are being created and shipped in from communist China. And there are slave gulags, which are actually creating sacks of this stuff. And I actually feature in my film Secret Space Volume 3. You can see photographs of those sacks with Chinese stamps on them at airfields all over the United States of America. And I also show photographs of the insides of these planes. And, just look at what's going on. Here in the Mediterranean, where I am now, I'm speaking to you from the south of France, we have these very large black bees. They're so black, they're kind of purple. These are the big Mediterranean bees. They're enormous. They're like twice the size of a British bumblebee. They're wiped out. You very rarely see those now. Rabbits. Hardly no rabbits in this area anymore. We're seeing the effects of this. These insects are essential for the pollination of plants.
Oh, yeah.
And by taking the insects out of the pollination process, there is more. The farmers have to rely more on people like Monsanto.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's the first rub-off that we're seeing from chemtrailing.
Yeah.
Now, aluminium is extremely toxic. I have to say this to everybody. When you have takeaway food, the most non-toxic way of having your food is by taking like a kind of china dish or whatever, but that's impractical. The best thing is to have just paper or cardboard. Aluminium is extremely toxic. You must never cook in aluminium foil. Plastic is also very toxic as well. A lot of these takeaway food restaurants are putting boiling hot, oily food into plastic containers. The inner layer of that plastic releases plasticides, and that goes into your body. Now, aluminium creates Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And I believe that what we're seeing a double-headed, it's like a double-edged sword with the chemtrailing phenomenon. I actually say this in my film, is that by wiping out the pollinating insects, there's going to be more business for the agrochemical companies. But at the same time, we're going to see a reduction in the number of people who are able to think straight in their advanced years. People will, after the age of about 45, 50, 55, they would OD on a lot of TV, and then they would just deteriorate intellectually, and therefore the status quo of the tiny, tiny political elite would never, ever be challenged by any intellectual revolution, which is what we've seen, in the world's history.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds far-fetched, but we know that aluminium creates Alzheimer's disease.
Yes, we do. Chris, we're at the top of the hour, and I think it's a great time to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. I have a couple more questions referring to the chemtrail phenomenon, and then I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the book and your research and what you've discovered as far as I read somewhere that you had discovered, was it coca leaves in the pharaoh's tombs or something to that effect? Something that was on the Western world was found in the Eastern world, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love to get more into that. So let's take a short break. I figure that we're talking a little bit about Egypt and stuff, so let's go with Lorena McKinnock's Ancient Muse for the musical break today. This is Bernard Alvarez with Yvonne Weiss and Trevor Nutt, speaking with Enigma TV's Chris Everard on his book, Stone Age Psychedelia, and we'll be back in just a few moments after the short musical break. Hang around, everybody. We'll be right back. That was really, really nice for our musical break. That's Lorena McKinnock's Ancient Muse. You're listening to the Just Bernard Show here on GIC Radio. We are having a really fantastic and fascinating discussion with Chris Everard on his new book, Stone Age Psychedelia. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about the chemtrail phenomenon and trying to figure out what the agenda is behind it. Chris is very learned in many of these topics, so I figured while we had him on the show, I could ask him a few questions. Actually, before I go into the discussion again, I just want to remind everybody that next Monday, because we're on the chemtrail subject, we're going to be interviewing Roxy Lopez for the 2 hours. And for those of you that know, Roxy does have a show here on GIC Radio, but we haven't had an opportunity to pick her brain on the research that she's been doing on this very subject. So without further ado, let me welcome everybody back and welcome Chris and Yvonne and Trevor back to the conversation. Chris, before we went on the break, we were talking about the aluminum. And I did some digging around thanks to Roxy. She directed me into one of what I call a rabbit hole. And there seems to be an organization or a company or corporation, I forgot the name of it, but their thing is to create aluminum-resistant forests. They are literally redoing forests with aluminum-resistant Monsanto seeds. Have you heard anything about that, or?
Yeah.
Why would they do that? Is it because of the poisoning?
Yeah, it's a real mystery. I haven't researched that, and I did have somebody. I think it was Rob Allen, who I think he's one of the admins with me and you, Bernard, yes, on Exposing the Truth. Rob Allen. He lives near Avebury, which is the world's biggest stone circle. Rob, I think it was Rob who posted that story on my Facebook page. Rob's Facebook page, I have to say to anyone, it's worth joining Facebook just to go to Rob's page.
Yeah. It's true.
So, it's not something which I've really investigated, but it's sort of, it looks like, the whole thing is an agrochemical scam and a way of dumbing people down all rolled into one.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I'm finding that, it's leading to a lot of different diseases, whether it be respiratory, whether it be Alzheimer's. We hear a little bit about, the Morgellons, what do they call it now, the genetically modified organism disease. Yes. That they're finding within the droppings, for lack of a better term, what drops out of the sky.
Yeah.
And it just, again, bringing it all back into this whole multinational corporation that are supposed to be in competition with each other are literally working together for, not necessarily in the benefit of humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we saw that 65 years ago when IBM were supplying the counting machines and the calculating technology for Nazi Germany, so that they could count up the number of prisoners which they'd taken off the streets and out of their houses. And IBM were supplying the calculation technology to the Nazis, and then another company, kind of agrochemical company called IG Farben. They were, developing all of the chemicals that were used in mustard gas and all these terrible weapons that the Nazis were using. And they had a head office in Paris. And who do we find when we look through the history books working as a senior executive in the Paris office of IG Farben, wearing an SS uniform? It's Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands.
Oh, my.
And the Netherlands were meant to be on our side.
Yeah.
It's, at the highest level of business. I mean, you can see it in Silicon Valley. You can see that in Silicon Valley, you've got this very, very tiny clique of people, and they are really basically responsible for this global economic recession. And the recession started when this tiny cabal of people in Silicon Valley began this kind of campaign of redefining the whole concept of copyright and actually making copyright a dirty word. And this has caused massive job losses in the film industry right the way around the world. We now have Google Books, which is like a kind of book version of YouTube, where any book can just be looked at for nothing. So the entire publishing industry is probably going to go on the slide, the same as the film industry. And of course, years ago, the record industry had already been thrown to the dogs because legislation, the FBI, the police, were not stringent enough. I mean, okay, now, we see this rather, kind of overreaction with Mega Upload's boss, this German guy called Kim Schmidt, being threatened with, I think it's something crazy, like 150 years in jail.
Oh, jeez.
It's an overreaction. It's too little, too late. And this all comes from, by the way, Stanford University. The professors that came up with this new form of copyright, which is not really copyright at all. It's just a licensing thing that allows big companies to go to Flickr and just take anybody's photograph and use it in their poster displays, which is what happened in Australia just recently, where a girl was walking down the street and she saw these great big billboards with the photo of her that her teacher at school had taken of her, being used in billboards. And she couldn't do anything about it because when you upload anything to these websites, unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize it. Members of the public do not use words like copyright. They don't use words like infringement.
Right.
They don't understand what those terms mean. They want to upload their photos. They want to upload their videos. And then these big corporations come along and steal it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is very, very unfortunate. And what they've done is they've paid lobbyists who have gone in. They've created new legislation. There's legislation that protects these big businesses, especially the businesses up in Silicon Valley. And, things like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. The guy that wrote that, his name is Bruce Lehman, has actually come out and he's actually said now publicly, and funnily enough it's on a YouTube video, where he's at McGill University in Canada, and he's actually saying this has been a disaster because these Silicon Valley companies are ripping off every sporting event, every TV show, every kid's cartoon, every movie that's ever been made. Documentaries, you can tune in and watch everything. And the people that make up the creative kind of brilliance within mankind, the authors, the inventors, the technologists, the screenwriters, the graphic designers, the typographers, the photographers, the cinematographers, the sound technicians, the people that really push creative thought forward on the cutting edge of mankind, they can't pay their bills.
Yeah. Hey, I am a victim of that myself. As you know, I post all of my stuff on YouTube, and YouTube, excuse me, literally has stolen maybe 1/3 of my original work. I mean, I can understand if I put up a music video with someone else's music, but of my work, of me speaking, of my photographs that I photograph myself, someone will come along, a big corporation will come along and say, oh, this is ours. And do I want to refute it in court? Of course I can't afford to refute it in court.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to take it down because I don't want to lose the public's ability to view the work that I've done. But the whole idea that I need to refute my own work, it's just outrageous to me. So I see that. What are your thoughts, actually? Because I was involved with WIPO for a little while. That's actually how I got my launch into the internet world, was doing work with WIPO and their International Peace Day. For those of you that don't know, WIPO is out of the United Nations. And I was wondering if you had any knowledge on WIPO and their work, and is it beneficial? Is it helpful? Is it hurting? You know, I personally pulled away because I didn't like the elitist mentality involved, but I was wondering if you've had any situations or problems with your work and WIPO.
Yeah, WIPO. WIPO, I mean, just take one look at their logo. It's a fantastic little logo. I love their logo. You know, it shows I think it shows a painter, an author, somebody writing a script. I mean, if it wasn't for these international treaties, like the Berne Convention, the Uruguay TRIPS treaties, WIPO, you know, we would be in a much worse situation than what we're in now. And, you know, the thing is that the lobbyists have been paid millions and millions and millions of dollars every week. And it's fed through into the media that the word copyright is actually a dirty word. Mm-hmm. And it's like there's books now being published which talk about the copyright industries. Like they say that Hollywood is a copyright industry, or the record industry is a copyright industry. Copyright is for everyone. It's a universal right. And the reason that the WIPO existed as part of the United Nations is because copyright is part of your human rights. Mm-hmm. Every time you take a photograph of your children, your pet, your dog, you immediately have the copyright of that photograph. Mm. If you write a poem on a notepad by the side of the bed, that is immediately fixated into your name. It is one of the most fundamental human rights. There is no such thing as a copyright industry.
Right.
That is complete fallacy, which has been put forward by a tiny, tiny group of professors at Stanford University in Silicon Valley, and their students. Their students have gone off. They've created illegal business models, which are based on, they are predicated on stealing people's work. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about old age pensioners who have like a memorial get together and they all take a photograph and they stick it on a website. It touches absolutely every single person. It's nothing to do, really, primarily with Hollywood or the big record industries. It's to do with everyone. Mm-hmm. Copyright is a human right for you, me, everybody. Absolutely. And this is a scam, and it's a multi-trillion, possibly quadrillion-dollar scam, which is being perpetrated on the whole of humankind. And Facebook is full of anti-copyright type postings. Now, this is the interesting thing. I posted up a thing about the San people in Africa. Now, everybody knows certain brands and certain products in their health food stores, like, for example, jojoba and other kind of plant extract products. Well, the San people in Africa, they have a fantastic culture based on extracting, pressing, mashing, mushing, extracting juices from lots and lots of different plants. These big pharmaceutical companies came along, they infiltrated the San people, they told them, oh, we're going to help you. You guys, you know, we'll buy land for you guys, we'll help you out. They stayed there, and these ancient techniques of pressing, you know, extracting, pulping, those extracts were taken by these pharmaceutical companies. They were resynthesized in laboratories in Switzerland, and now you see products on the shelves in supermarkets and pharmacies worldwide which were actually created by the San people of Africa. Mm-hmm. Now, when I posted that up on Facebook, oh, isn't that terrible? Everybody said, oh, isn't that awful? And then I posted underneath it, I said, that is what copyright does. Copyright protects people like the San people. Mm-hmm. And then everybody didn't click the like anymore.
Right. I think what seems to be the issue here that we're really covering is that there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what is happening with this whole copyright issue. I understand, for me, as someone who has been affected by it, it's this whole mess with like ACTA and SOPA and PIPA and all of these. People don't understand. It's basically, for me as an individual, and I don't know how it is for you, Chris, because I know that you make a lot of documentaries, but for me, I find that it's really to protect the big corporations and to give them more freedom to steal my copyright. I don't see it as protecting the small guy. I see it as protecting the big guy.
Exactly.
And it's just like their right to pillage and prosecute those for, you know, let's say, well, here's a good example. Let's say someone downloads one of your videos illegally. Do you think ACTA's really going to protect you? You know, or are they going to just make a big hoo-ha when someone takes Lady Gaga's video?
Yeah.
You know.
ACTA is slowly, gradually being ratified. Now, the difference with ACTA, the difference between ACTA and SOPA and PIPA and all the others is that ACTA allows somebody that's had their work stolen from them to go along to a judge on their own. There's no trial, there's no formality, and there's a Latin phrase in the ACTA legislation called in audita ex parte. Now that means that say for example you find an eBayer, which is a classic example.
Yeah.
There's counterfeited, millions of pounds worth of, say, whatever product you've made, could be a CD, whatever. You can go along under the new ACTA legislation to a judge without any trial, and eBay wouldn't even know about it. And you can sit down with the judge, and the judge will sit there in his chambers. This isn't even happening in a court. You're just in his office. And you can actually show the judge, right, these are, say, this is just a hypothetical example, these are the power seller statistics from the storefront from this eBayer. I've looked at all of the customers that have bought the counterfeited versions of my product, and the judge just basically goes through that. And the advantage of ACTA is that if you've presented the evidence clearly, cleanly, and it's properly presented, and it can be verified by the judge there and then, you get a provisional judgment. And with that provisional judgment, and also he sends a letter saying that your costs, this is a very, very important thing, your costs for going to see the judge, your time in investigating it have to be immediately paid. So, this ACTA situation is being ratified, but I've noticed that the lobbyists who are being paid by all these Silicon Valley companies who, have got the muscle now, they're even, they've started these business models which are predicated on stealing copyright. That's video sharing websites are really video stealing websites. And they've taken the money from the advertising and they've gone and used that money to pay very, very clever, very, very kind of super technical experts at the stock market exchanges, and they've managed to go public. So they're on NASDAQ. So these pirates have gone from, in the old days when everything was on VHS, and they used to have like 50 VHS machines in a shed in the garden. It's gone from that to them being listed on NASDAQ.
That's crazy.
Now, regardless of whether they're in a shed or whether they're on NASDAQ, the law is the same, and look at Enron, look at WorldCom. People have this impression that big companies are too big to fail. Well, that's not right. There are some fascinating quotes from Steve Jobs on his deathbed. And Steve Jobs said that he wanted, this is a direct instruction from Steve Jobs as he was dying. He said, I want you to use every cent of the $40 billion that Apple have in the bank, and I want you to declare thermonuclear warfare on Google.
Oh, God.
And this was his instruction, and that lawsuit is going on right now. And the reason for that, and by the way, do you see that reported in the news?
Of course not.
No. And the reason that he said that is because the Android phone, which is actually manufactured under a license by Samsung and other people, as far as Steve Jobs was concerned, what he alleges in his lawsuit, which you can actually download, you can actually read exactly what Apple are saying, he says that was stolen technology. It was stolen from Apple. Now, when you look at who was on the board of Apple in the years that the iPhone, the iPad, and the iPod were being developed, who was on the board of Apple? Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google. And, I've read lots of different reports. Some allege different things, but generally the kind of lay of the land is that this Eric Schmidt guy was asked to leave the board of Apple because there was an obvious competition crisis opening up where, this Android phone was basically an iPhone. Now, another thing that's happened, which is again not being reported, is that British Telecom, which is a company that goes back to 1846, that own thousands of patents, have all of a sudden launched this lawsuit against Google. And what British Telecom are saying is that Google Documents, Google Maps, Google AdWords, and several of the other Google applications, I can't remember all of them, but it's like the major part of the Google empire, have all been stolen. This is what British Telecom allege. Have all been stolen from the patents that were created at Dastral Laboratories in Ipswich, which is where, going back more than 100 years ago, that's where they invented things like the fax machine.
Oh, wow.
And now 51% of British Telecom is owned by Her Majesty. The other 49% is on the stock market with the London Stock Exchange. This company could crush crush Google, and not even, it'd be like somebody crushing an ant.
Wow.
Now, Google are now faced with this enormous Apple lawsuit. And Android tablets, there's 50,000 Android tablets, which a German newspaper they allege that there's 50,000 of these Google tablets that have been seized at a Samsung warehouse, and they're being crushed by bulldozers this week.
Oh, wow.
Now, the thing is that, Google is looked upon as a company with this nice little candy-colored kind of logo, and it's a search engine,
Right.
People, I posted up the information about the British Telecom lawsuit. The damages that British Telecom are claiming are not in the millions. They are in the multi-billions. By the way, last year, there was already a lawsuit that was from Oracle. Oracle invented the Java computer language.
Yeah.
And Oracle sued Google. And when I read that lawsuit, it was fascinating. Everybody was going on about Pippa and SOPA at the time. I was reading this lawsuit, and you know what? The Oracle investigation, it basically found memos from Google, and it found emails from Google. And what it is that this Google engineer, this young guy, was asked by Google to test all the best languages, computer languages, that they could use for the new Android phone. So this guy went, he was a Google engineer. He's just like, an oily rag in this enormous multi-billion-dollar corporation. And he went through all the computer languages, and he sent a memo to the bosses, and he says, listen, Java is the best one, okay? And, so they answered, and they said, well, why? And he sent an email back saying, because all the others suck. Now, what happened is instead of the Google bosses paying Oracle legitimately, let's face it, they're not exactly short of money. Instead of paying Oracle rightfully the money to use the Java language, they stole it. And this has all come out in another lawsuit, which is from a year ago. So, we have a very complicated situation. There is a new act, which nobody's really even discussing, called the Open Act. Now, this is being sponsored by Google, and it's being sponsored by Yahoo. And like you were saying, Bernard, there is legislation out there that protects these monopolies.
Yeah.
And this Open Act is apparently going to be, passed before Pippa ever gets a chance. So it's a very, very complicated situation. People do not understand it. People have been brainwashed. I have to say to the listeners, me and Bernard are administrators on Exposing the Truth, which is a Facebook thing started by John and Aaron.
A huge Facebook page.
Oh, it's a massive phenomenon. And, I know Aaron has posted up lots and lots of anti-Stop SOPA, Stop Pippa postings. And I've read, I read both sides of the story.
Yeah.
That's my job. I'm basically an investigative journalist. That's what I do. And I've read all of Aaron's postings, and then I've read all these lawsuits. And I'm sort of stuck in the middle between all of these things. And then I go to the Exposing the Truth administration page where me and Bernard are administrators, and I see that Aaron has put Exposing the Truth copyright 2012. So he obviously does have some faith in copyright, which he should have.
Absolutely, we all should. Absolutely.
We should all have it. It's a natural right. And without copyright, the monopolized industries, I'm talking about the globalization, which, we've seen in the last decade, cause massive havoc in the third world.
Mm-hmm. The
globalization agenda of centralization and big corporations absorbing slightly smaller corporations and becoming mega corporations, if we throw away copyright, we will not only see the record industry go to the dogs, which it already has because of Grokster and Napster and all of these other things. We will see that you will not be able to, say, for example, make a funny camcorder video of your baby or your dog or whatever and post it up without the fear that that's going to end up in a TV commercial. This is really what they are after, because there have been several instances where emails have been sent, and some of my friends have had these emails from YouTube, and the gist of the email says, "Oh, we have noticed that your YouTube channel is very, very popular, and would you like to monetize it?" Now, some of my friends, I've said to them, because I've never uploaded any of my stuff. 220 odd million people have watched my films, but I've never uploaded anything to any of these sites. I don't even have accounts with most of them. I was forced to start a YouTube account in 2009 or 2008 it was, because I wanted to complain, and they wouldn't even let you complain about copyright infringement unless you had an account.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really terrible. But anyway, I've never uploaded anything. By the way, if you do upload any of your material, then it's very difficult to argue in a court, that it's an infringement. But anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I go through that all the time.
Yeah. Some of my friends, they've had these emails. I don't know whether you've had one, Bernard. It says, we've noticed that your YouTube channel is very, very popular. Would you like to monetize it?
Oh, well, I'm one of the original YouTube partners before Google even bought YouTube. I was one of the first partners.
Now,
all of a sudden, now they're taking away all my videos, saying that I need to give better documentation, that I didn't dot my I or cross my T, and all these kind of things. And they've made it literally for the big corporations now. That's all.
Yeah.
So now I do raw video. That's it. I don't even bother with graphics or music or anything like that. I have been to the point, Chris, actually, where I have paid for music, paid to buy the copyright of the music, and they tell me that another company has bought out that company and I no longer own the copyright. I mean, that's how ridiculous it's gotten.
Well, that's a scam.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd say straight away that that's a scam, Bernard. I mean, I've sort of given myself a kind of education in legal matters simply because my documentaries must be the most counterfeited kind of political type kind of documentaries of their kind in the world. I mean, if you go onto any of the eBay storefronts, you'll see my films everywhere.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I'm very, very annoyed about it because, they mutilate my films in lots of different ways.
Well, they do mashups, I've noticed. They'll do like a clip with you and a clip with David Icke and a clip with Jordan Maxwell and just mush it all together,
Yeah, but I'm talking about actual mutilation in terms of these bloody overlaid adverts all over my films. I mean, I really don't like that.
Well, you should be receiving the revenue from those overlays.
By the law, they are not allowed to re-commercialize stuff which they don't own the copyright to. Well, they argue, of course, that, this, it could be, say, for example, a YouTube account holder who's got a YouTube account name that is 11100110110. Yeah.
Right.
And then I complain to them, and they say, well, 1110101001 owns that, or that's what they claimed.
Right, and then you have to pay for the court costs to claim.
Well, in actual fact, and this is a very, very good tip to everybody, there are lawyers now with websites that give advice to people who've had their rights ripped off, like me and other millions of people. I mean, we could be talking about as many as 1 billion songwriters, authors, screenwriters, photographers, you name it. I mean, there's a lot of us, let's face it, journalists, you name it. And there's some lawyers now, I've found some of them, they actually say that it's within your right that when you send what is known as a Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown notice, that's taken up your time. And so therefore, when you send that notice in, you send them an invoice. Now, some of the lawyers say, well, sometimes they pay those invoices, sometimes they don't. But I believe that a good judge should say, well, the infringement was created because the website existed and they didn't supervise it properly.
Yeah.
And so my advice to everybody who's listening to this who's been ripped off is to invoice immediately. and read up on the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Is not that complicated. I think it's Google that have actually made statements saying there's never ever been a court case where the copyright holder has won. That's nonsense. So I was reading a judgment from the appeal courts earlier today when I was doing a little bit of research into SOPA and PIPA and this mega upload thing. And there are court cases, by the way, Google, Mr. Google, Dr. Google, whoever is in charge, where people, ordinary everyday people, had sent notifications. The infringing stuff was not taken down expeditiously, which means in Europe it means within 24 hours. If you are a European author, you can expect standards according to European law under the Berne Convention, by the way. Because the Berne is like WIPO. It's one of these big international treaties. And all the Berne authors, all the Berne songwriters, screenwriters, filmmakers, they can walk into a United States court. They don't have to pre-register any of their copyrights. They don't have to pre-register their trademarks. In fact, if you are an author especially, or you're a host like you, Bernard, your name is a natural common law trademark. They're not even allowed to have that in a search engine results index without your permission.
Wow.
So, it's this SOPA and PIPA thing is, it's forced me to really research it, because I could smell that there was something not quite right on Facebook, especially. It seemed that 99.999% of everything that was being posted was all anti-copyright.
Well, that's the whole thing with, I like to say, with bandwagons. People jump on a bandwagon and they don't really research what that means to the other side. There's always, three sides, yours, mine, and the truth. But it's really important that people really do the research and understand. There are going to be negative aspects to it. I for one do not like the idea that people can be sent to jail for 150 years, for doing something as non-violent as uploading one of my videos without my permission. However, I don't like people stealing my stuff. Like I've had these companies I've never even heard of claim copyrights on my stuff, and it's like, who are you? And YouTube will follow through on that. We're running out of time, Chris. Wow, we got about 20 minutes left. This has gone by so quickly. So we spoke before the break, and I wanted to turn the subject a little bit back to your book and discuss a little bit about how you found, or what did you find as far as Western psychedelics in Egypt. I found that to be very fascinating. You had mentioned that you had found they had found cocaine in the Pharaoh's tombs and whatnot.
That's it. Absolutely right. This happened, actually, the discovery happened in Paris. What happened is that the mummy of King Ramesses II was deteriorating. So the Museum of Mankind in Paris, they offered to, clean and renovate this mummy. So the mummy was shipped over, ended up in Paris, and it was on show, actually, for a while as well. Now, what they found is that they found cocaine and they found tobacco in that mummy. Now, also, he'd been eating hashish. Now, the thing is that the hashish was not a surprise, because Lebanon, Palestine, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, they have a very, very ancient culture to do with marijuana, hemp, and hashish. That wasn't a surprise. What was a surprise is that tobacco comes from South America, and coca leaves come from South America. Now, this was something which, talk about throw a spanner in the works, because really, basically, this discovery requires all history books, all textbooks worldwide in every language to be rewritten. Because it's clear that during the pharaonic dynasties, maybe even before the time of King Ramses II, there was some global trade going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Egyptians actually went to America, though I believe they did.
Yeah.
What it could mean is that there was maybe a halfway point where people from South America made their way up into North America, up into Canada, went across into Greenland, and then came down through maybe ice bridges and ended up in the Western Hebrides of Scotland. And similarly, a long journey was made by the Magi, who you see in the biblical and Judaic texts. The Magi were basically they were kind of drug peddlers of the ancient world, and there wasn't really, let's face it, a developed currency system in the Middle East. There were definitely currencies in China, in the Oriental world, but magic mushrooms, dried and prepared resins like frankincense, Syrian rue seeds, these were the currency, and the Magi were the peddlers who were nomadic, and they went across the deserts with the Bedouins, and that's how they survived. They would go to the mountains in the Adriatic, and they would collect fly agaric mushrooms, which are the typical red and white toadstools that you see in the illustrated Alice in Wonderland books.
Yeah.
And they would then bring those dried back to Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and swap those for Syrian rue seeds, which they would then, they would then take to, say, for example, Burkina Faso and Ethiopia. Now, the fact that cocaine managed to make its way to Egypt thousands and thousands of years ago really means that we have to rethink transportation in the ancient world, engineering, navigation, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And this was reported in the French-speaking media because the discovery was made in Paris, in the 1970s. Excuse me. And in the French world, in Quebec, all the French-speaking territories around the world, this was big news. This was very, very big news. But outside of the French-speaking world, we are now, with the publication of my book and a couple of documentaries that have been broadcast on Channel 4 television in the United Kingdom, the English-speaking world is only just waking up to this fact. And, there is no evidence of a tobacco-like plant in ancient Egypt. There's no evidence of a coca-type plant either. And also, we're also dealing with pretty advanced pharmacology, because they were using opium 5,500 years ago, and the pharaohs were eating opium. They were eating hashish, and now we know that they were chewing and smoking tobacco.
Wow.
And in terms of their own indigenous plants, the plants which I believe were being traded back into America, I believe that the blue lotus flower is probably one of the most important plants, one of the most important currencies of the ancient world. When you see Krishna, he's sitting on a lotus.
Yeah.
When you see Buddha, he's floating on a lotus. And if you look at the iconography of ancient Egypt, what do you see? You see the lotus flower. Now, the lotus flower, when that's chopped up and it's put into a bottle of wine and left to steep, and you drink that, it creates a pretty kind of dreamy MDMA type effect. And so I believe that the sacred lakes at Luxor, the temple of Luxor, where I was just about 3 or 4 months ago, those lakes were private. They were not open to the public. And these giant lakes, one is a kind of crescent shape, like a crescent moon. The other one is a giant rectangle. This is a pretty big engineering kind of project to actually make these artificial lakes. They were there, I believe, to create a crop of psychedelic blue lotus flowers for the dynastic kings and queens. And these people, over a very, very long time, I'm talking about dozens and dozens of centuries, these people were permanently psychedelically plugged in to this psychotelepathic communion with the ether and the spirit world through the use of these ancient plants. And I believe that this has had a long-term effect on the congenital formation of the brains in the children of those pharaohs. And I believe that this is what happened with Akhenaten.
Oh.
Yeah, I really do think that this is... If you can imagine being constantly plugged into a psychedelic trip, and you are the richest person on the planet, you just have to wave your little finger and you can have anything you want. You've got the world's greatest astrologers, you've got the world's greatest architects, you've got the world's greatest engineers, all at your disposal. You've got unlimited amounts of gold, gemstones, and you are constantly tripping.
Mm-hmm.
This is really basically the picture of the ancient world, or at least the world of the ancient Illuminati, which I paint in my book Stone Age Psychedelia, because this is really what's been going on since Neolithic Age. Since the Neolithic Age, the Illuminati, the super wealthy elite throughout history, have always had these psychedelic plants as part and parcel of their, if you like, secret armory that they've used. And it's given them a communal kind of telecommunication line directly to the Godhead.
Fascinating.
So, yeah.
Now, speaking of the Illuminati, and I thank you for clarifying how we ended up with cocaine in Ramses' tomb. With the Illuminati families, what I'd like to ask you is, how is it possible in the last, we have about 10 minutes left, is it possible to kind of create a picture for the listeners of how the dark Illuminati families of ancient Egypt? Because, for me, I've done a lot of research myself. I see where, we went from a egalitarian Egyptian, prehistoric Egyptian society to a more empirical society, which is where I feel is the birth of the Illuminati. And you can clarify if I'm mistaken. But as these families move through the centuries, how do they spread out? How do they end up taking over commerce and basically religion and war and everything?
Well, basically, Egypt was always two countries. It was Upper and Lower Egypt, and there was always political pressure on Upper Egypt, which is actually Southern Egypt, from the Sudanese warlords. And there was also pressure from the Mediterranean cultures as well. Now, what you see, basically, is constant kind of inch-by-inch invasion. Sometimes it was diplomatic invasion. Sometimes it was warfare invasion on the Egyptian culture. And a good example is Alexander the Great. And he was actually crowned a pharaoh. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
He actually set up a court at Luxor, at the Temple of Karnak in the Holy of Holies. There was a kind of riot there, and he actually rebuilt and renovated the Holy of Holies chamber at the Temple of Karnak, and he was crowned on a boat on the lake there. And so he was a self-styled pharaoh, and there were many of these self-styled pharaohs encroaching on the original dynasties. Basically, there was infighting, and that created a kind of splinter. And you see this in all these kinds of situations where you have priesthoods and mystical, magical schools. You have lots of initiates, and there's competition, and there's big egos involved. and really basically Egypt as a kingdom during the dynastic period was all clustered around the Nile. And what you had is you had just a non-stop string of these amazing mystery school kind of complexes where people would travel from all over North Africa, all over the Mediterranean, all over Europe, and they would go there to be taught the mysteries, and they would bring gifts, and the leaders of these priesthoods became very, very wealthy, and there was a lot of infighting. Now, what happened is that we had this very strange, congenitally deformed, if you like, kind of family come along, who'd come from the Tutmosis reign, and this was Akhenaten. And if you go to the Luxor Museum, not the Cairo Museum, but if you go to the Luxor Museum, by the way, Luxor is as quiet as anything. You see this image on the news that Egypt is in some kind of crisis. That's only really happening in one place in Cairo. And the violence that you're seeing is always, I can tell you this now, is always directed at the 7 or 8 million Christians that actually are the original Egyptians. Down in Luxor, it's very quiet. You're a long way. It's 10 hours by train from Cairo. It's more than an hour in a plane. I've done that flight 4 times. And, down there, it's very relaxed. And quite frankly, you haven't got pyramids down in Luxor, but you've got the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, the Temple of Karnak, Luxor Temple. It's absolutely jam-packed with amazing places where you just stumble around and you literally are tripping over things that are thousands of years old.
Wow.
And, Luxor, this was a major kind of center that the Sudanese warlords wanted to control it. And they gradually encroached their way up. And, the Sudanese pharaohs, when you see this black basalt, finely polished rock, and they have those typical Negroid features, they're the Sudanese warlords. So we had them, we had Alexander the Great. Things really, really changed when black magicians from the royal family of Greece, the Ptolemaic royal family, they moved in big time. And they actually did some fantastic, incredible architectural work there. They ingratiated themselves with all the artisans, ingratiated themselves with the priesthoods, gave the priests a lot of information from the mystery schools of Greece and from Crete and from other parts of the Mediterranean, crowned themselves, self-styled themselves as pharaohs, and this is what you see, for example, at the Temple of Dendera. The crypts of Dendera are the oldest parts. That's where you see the frog-headed humanoid kind of Ogdoad gods, which I write about in Feed Your Brain magazine, where they have this incredible weird plasma technology, these giant light bulbs. That's in the crypt. That's the oldest part. And as you progress up through the different levels of the temple, so you get to the roof, and on the roof you see all of the additions to that temple made by the Ptolemaic kings. Now, I went to the British Library, which is part of the British Museum in London, when I came back from the trip to Egypt I did just recently. And in the so-called King's Library, which is the world's biggest and most valuable repository of magical texts you've ever seen in your life, it's 6 or 7 stories high. Wow. It's in a kind of double-glazed, super secure thing. It looks like something out of Mission Impossible.
Wow.
In there, by appointment only, you can actually see books on black magic written by the royal family of Greece.
Oh.
And that was the beginning of the end of the dynastic period of Egypt. The Greek people got in there, they ingratiated themselves, they took over, they remodeled Dendera, they remodeled some of the other temples, and they stole all of the technology of ancient Egypt. They stole the astronomical knowledge, they stole the astrological knowledge, They took the greatest soothsayers, the people that were sacrificing bulls at dawn every morning, and knew how to read the shape of a liver, the best diviners, the best druggists, the best magi were all taken to Greece. And that was the beginning of the end.
I was going to say, and then what happened is, I guess their version of mysticism started spreading through the elites into Europe?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, the Greeks themselves were under a lot of pressure from the Italians, and you had this kind of Mediterranean kind of tug-of-war going on.
Yeah.
And that lasted for many, many centuries. But, yeah, I mean, you know, we still see elements of Egyptian magic within high ceremonial magic that's practiced by what I would say the aristocratic secret societies in London. Mm-hmm. And in Feed Your Brain magazine, just the other day, I've just published this 20-page fully illustrated special feature about Sir Henry Rawlinson, who was this British army officer, and he went to Nineveh, which is where the Babylonian clay tablets that show you how to summon all of the evil spirits from the spirit world, he got those. He went through all of the chaos and rubble there, and he actually built a home for himself in Babylon.
Wow. And
he brought those clay tablets back to the British Museum, and then they started having seances in 1904 back at the British Museum. In actual fact, the Science Museum, the British Library, and the British Museum, if you go there, you can see that these are the world's biggest depositories of black magic paraphernalia you've ever seen in your lives. There's books there written in blood. There's books that have been written in the medieval era on magic and how to make somebody blind, how to impose plague on people, and the author doesn't consider himself to be a Homo sapien because he's making references to Homo sapiens as if he's some other kind of creature.
Like a third person or something. Anyway, this is very, very fascinating. We've only got a minute left, though, Chris. This went by so quickly, and I really appreciate, oh my goodness, so much information that we have the opportunity now to go back and listen to in the archive, all of our listeners. Ever so quickly, where can we find you? What's your main website that people can check out?
Well, the Enigma channel is
of course.
enigmatv.com, and there's about 500-600 documentaries there. And feedyourbrainmagazine.com is my monthly magazine. Wonderful. So enigmatv.com and feedyourbrainmagazine.com. And my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, it's on Amazon.com and on Amazon.co.uk, the British Amazon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us today, Chris. We're so honored to have you on again here on GIC.
It's a pleasure, Bernard.
Thank you, Chris.
That's it, everybody. Next week we have Roxy Lopez. We'll see you next Monday. Have a wonderful week, and thank you all.
Bye.